If you've ever had a child, or if you have siblings, then you know that experience is one of the most fundamental ways that human beings learn about the world around them. From the moment that we are born, we have spent our whole lives processing every experience we've ever had so that we could form a framework upon which we've built our lives. Assuming that a child grows up in a fairly normal household, the child learns to trust its parents. The child associates its parents with feelings of warmth and kindness. It associates them with a feeling of security and certainty that no harm will come to it. This processing of experiences to form an understanding of the world around you carries on throughout life. Fast forward to the first time that a child sees fire. It sees something strange, but somehow also beautiful. Having seen flowers before, it instantly notices the resemblance and wants to pick it up and interact with it. Its curiosity is further piqued by the fact that this new flower, this new crimson rose, is not frozen in time. Its petals are dancing in the wind. They sway and move, luring the child in. If this child has negligent parents, who are probably sitting in the other room, they will be alerted of what has happened by the loud screaming of their child. They will likely find the child rolling around on the floor in tears, having touched the crimson rose's dancing petals. It's at this point that the child is now in a strange place psychologically. Up to this point in the child's life, flowers have been a beautiful thing to be touched and interacted with and held. But now this experience has caused a change. The solid understanding that this child was standing on has now been pulled from underneath it. The mind now floats in the depths of a dark ocean as it frantically attempts to grab at whatever wisps of understanding or sense that it can. Through continued experience, the child eventually comes to understand the distinction between fire and flowers. The child grows up, finishes high school, gets accepted into their dream university and starts studying. While studying, perhaps by chance, they meet someone they like. If all goes well, then they fall in love, and for a while, it's great. The constant back and forth conversations about interests that they have in common, the planning a future together, the hours spent together cuddling and kissing and doing all sorts of things. The intimacy draws them together and their hearts hold hands. But for one reason or the other, the relationship comes to an unpleasant end. In most cases, both parties are left with a sour taste in their mouth. Not only are they left with a sour taste in their mouth, but they're left wearing rose-tinted glasses. Not in a good way. Because of this experience, everywhere they look from now on, when they see people in relationships, they see them laughing and smiling, but the reality that they see is something that will end terribly. Something that will only lead to pain. Something that hurts. Something that isn't even worth trying to do any longer. They don't see the beauty in love. They don't see the beauty in this thing that they were once a part of. All they see now is suffering. Why do I tell you all this? It's because it's the only way I know how to explain what it is that I'm feeling. What it is that I've felt all this time. It's at this point that I feel I should give you a bit of a warning. Granted, I'm sure you started listening to this knowing exactly what you were getting yourself into, but I do still feel it's my responsibility to warn you yet again. I'm going to share some information, and once you've heard it, it's almost definitely going to have the same effect on you that it's had on me. If you've ever watched a movie called The Matrix, then you probably remember the scene with the red pill and the blue pill. I'm now going to give you an opportunity similar to that. Should you choose to carry on, then the way you look at the world will never be the same. But if you choose to walk away, then your mundane life will remain mundane. Nothing will change for you. this is your final warning. Turn back now or continue at your own peril. Still here? Alright then. You've been warned. December 23rd. It's dinner time. Everyone has just washed their hands, and as we settled down for dinner, my dad cracked through the rustling of chairs and made an announcement. I'm not sure how you guys feel about this, but a friend of mine is traveling for the holidays and he's asked if we could go watch his house. We don't have a chimney, but he does, so I thought that would be nice. There was a moment of silence around the table, as there usually was whenever Dad made announcements. But this silence was followed by a joyful response from Mom. Sure, that sounds like an amazing idea. You kids want to go have some fun looking after Dad's friend's house? My younger sister and I didn't need to respond with words. They could tell that we were more than happy with the announcement just by looking at our faces. The huge smiles plastered across them gave away exactly how we felt about the announcement. We said grace and had dinner, and the rest of the night was a bit of a blur as we packed our bags and tidied up around the house. We didn't want to come back to a mess. If you're anything like me, then you probably find it extremely difficult to fall asleep sometimes, especially when you've got something big happening the next day. And so, I sat on my phone as I lay in bed, scrolling through Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, trying to find something that was interesting enough that I would voluntarily watch it, but boring enough that I wouldn't mind falling asleep to it. Usually I find something within the first 10 to 15 minutes of laying in bed, but I guess tonight was just one of those nights. And I just lay there, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the days to come. My alarm rang at 4 a.m. and I was awake immediately. We threw our bags in the car and hopped on the road, arriving there at around 9 a.m. As we turned into the driveway, I looked out my window to see the curious neighbors peeking out from behind their curtains. My dad's friend came out of the front door to meet us, and as we offloaded our bags, some of the neighbors went from looking through their windows to standing in their front yards and staring at us curiously. I was particularly surprised when I turned around to see the girl next door looking straight at me, not even trying to hide where her gaze was directed. I was confused. I waved and she just stared with no response. I'll admit I was a bit weirded out. I briskly took my bags, and my dad took his, and my younger sister took hers, my mom took hers as well, and we made our way into the house. My dad's friend showed us to our separate bedrooms, then to the fireplace, then to the TV room with the big projector, then to the dining room with the big table, then to the pool. I was never a big fan of swimming, but the water here was so clear blue that I almost couldn't resist. I decided at that moment that at some point during our stay here, I would have to come for a plunge. So then I made my way back to my bedroom, and I finished unpacking my clothes. Then I decided I'd go outside to see if any of the neighbors were still being weird. I stepped out the front door, and although most of them seemed to have gone back inside, she was still standing there. And so I made my way over to her. "Hi there, my name's Michael. What's yours?" I asked. "My name is Michaela," she responded. "I'm sorry about earlier. I shouldn't have just been staring at you and your family. I just get nervous and anxious around new people, especially when they're moving into this house." I laughed, she smiled, and then I told her that although she did give me a bit of a fright earlier, it was alright, as long as she gave me her contacts. Smooth, I know. She passed me her phone number with a grin. I said goodbye and I went back inside. As I came through the front door, my dad had just been given a tour of the house and his friend was about to leave for his trip. I did overhear something about there being a power outage every night at 10 p.m. and that it was best to stay indoors during that time. I saw my dad nod in agreement as dads do. The man said goodbye and then we saw him off as he drove into the distance. I don't know how I hadn't noticed earlier, but the Christmas decorations were actually pretty decent. But that did leave me wondering then, why had he even bothered to set them up? He wasn't going to be here for the holidays after all. As I made my way to my room, I passed by the dining room table. There was a note. Something about seeing a note written on a big wooden dining room table immediately made me feel like I was in a bad Christmas horror movie. Don't forget to put out cookies and milk for Santa. I almost giggled at myself for being so serious. What was I getting worked up over? Now, the bed that I got was pretty soft, I thought to myself as I sat down and took out my phone. I figured I'd shoot a text at the girl next door and see what's up. Hi there, it's me, the guy from next door. Send. A couple of seconds passed and there was no response. Not the texting type, I gathered. I put aside my phone and I lay back. I said that I struggled to sleep, and because of that I was pretty tired, even though it was only 11 a.m. That, in addition to the fact that I was awake at 4 a.m. this morning, meant that I was extremely exhausted. So I turned on the fan and shut my eyes. Sleep came to me like a spring breeze and I was out stone cold. I was woken up at around 8 p.m. My blanket was violently pulled off of me and I saw a shadowy figure standing over me. "Come get some dinner, sleepyhead," said my dad, snapping me out of my nightmare with his familiar voice. I do remember two things about dinner. The first is that Mom made an amazing roast as usual. It's a tradition that she would roast a turkey every year on Christmas Eve, and just as a side note, as far as I'm concerned, she makes the best turkey on the planet. I don't know what seasoning she uses, maybe it's not even turkey at all. All I know is that it's amazing. The second thing I remember about dinner was that Dad told us about the power outage I overheard. It would be happening at 10 p.m. tonight. He told us that his friend told him that there would be a power outage. He also told us that he wasn't given a reason why there would be a power outage, but that we shouldn't be surprised when all the lights in the neighborhood suddenly turn off around that time. Dad said it would be best if we stayed indoors and slept, as there wouldn't be much for us to do. That way we could be up early and spend the rest of tomorrow in town going to the arcade, going bowling, going go-karting and doing all sorts of other fun things on Christmas. I was a bit disappointed, I'll admit. After all, who goes to bed before midnight on Christmas Eve? It's not normal. But I obliged. By the time we finished dinner, it was 9:45 p.m. and I hopped into bed after saying goodnight to everyone and being kissed on the forehead by Mom. When I got into bed, all I could think of was my phone. Then I realized that I still hadn't gotten a text back from the girl next door. I don't have any Wi-Fi here, so all I had was my mobile data. That meant that I couldn't watch any YouTube videos, nor could I browse Instagram, nor could I scroll on TikTok. So instead, I just lay there. 5 minutes passed, then 10 minutes passed, and I just lay there in my room. I was about to fall asleep when my phone lit up with a notification. I picked it up and saw the name Michaela written across the screen. Now, I knew from the moment that I first saw her that she was a bit of a weird character. But in this moment it became clear to me exactly how weird and strange she was. She wasn't saying hi in this message. She wasn't even apologizing for being so weird or taking so long to respond. Her message was one sentence. "If you hear the bells, stay asleep." Exactly as I read the last word, I heard what sounded like a large box being dropped, and the house went dark immediately. Damn it, I thought, already anticipating the rapidly approaching insomnia. With the little mobile data I had, I was forced to lay in bed alone with my thoughts. I started reflecting on the day that I had up to this point. I thought about the moment we turned into the driveway. The neighbors started peeking out from behind their curtains. I thought about how when we started offloading our bags, some of them came to stand in their front yards and watch us. I thought about the girl next door. I felt uncertainty crawl across my body while I remembered the first words she said to me. I just get nervous and anxious around new people, especially when they're moving into this house. What did she mean by that? I wondered as the world turned to black and I drifted off to sleep. If you've ever had sleep paralysis, then you understand exactly what I'm about to explain. I opened my eyes and my mind was fully awake. I lay there in bed, unable to move. The firecrackers in the distance and the cheering of the people told me exactly what time it was. But this also brought up a question. Didn't Dad say it would be best to stay inside? What about the power outage? I lay there, these questions running through my mind with my body turned toward the window. I couldn't move, but my eyes were free to do so. They scanned across the room, starting from the window that the moon poured in through, and I was confused when they fell upon a shadow at the foot of my bed. Now the moonlight was flooding into my bedroom with a light shimmer, but this shadow at the foot of my bed refused to be lit. I thought I was still dreaming, my mind being unable to understand what was happening here. But at this moment, as discomfort and anxiety built up inside my chest, I wanted to scream when I realized that the shadow was something standing at the foot of my bed. At the moment that I was about to yell or scream for help, it shifted, instinct kicked in, and I shut my eyes. I held my breath in a moment of dreadful anticipation. As I lay there with my eyes shut, holding my breath, this thing, whatever the hell it was, took a heavy step. The wooden floors creaked beneath it as it paused for a moment, and then it took another massive step towards the side of my bed. I lay still as it stood directly in front of me, obscuring the moonlight that was pouring in. I could smell it now. A wicked stench assaulted my nostrils. I would assume that that's what burnt flesh smelled like. A deep rumble resonated from it, and as the rumble faded, I began to hear the jingle of what sounded like bells. My brain was firing on all cylinders, and alarm bells blared in my thoughts. A text came to mind. If you hear the bells. I didn't move a muscle, as a grumble spoke from amidst the sound of bells. I wanted to cry. This must be a nightmare, I thought. Everything within me wanted to get up and run, but that text from the girl rang louder and louder in my head. If you hear the bells, stay asleep. If you hear the bells, stay asleep. If you hear the bells, stay asleep. I didn't move a muscle. When I heard the word, I didn't move a muscle. When the heavy footsteps left my room, I didn't move a muscle. The bells kept ringing, and I didn't move a muscle. The footsteps moved throughout the house, and I didn't move a muscle. I heard the grumble again. And I didn't move a muscle. I heard my younger sister scream, but I didn't move a muscle. I heard that thing mumble, but I didn't move a muscle. I heard the commotion as my parents scrambled to her room, but I didn't move a muscle. My mother's screams were accompanied by sounds I didn't know the human body was capable of making. Sounds of breaking wood, of tearing and ripping, but I didn't move a muscle. I could hear the bloodshed going on, but I didn't move a muscle. I could hear the bells, those bells, and so I didn't move a muscle. I heard a splat as the commotion quieted down, but I didn't move a muscle. I heard the steps, but I didn't move a muscle. Then I heard the bells quiet down. I was afraid. My heart was shaking. The silence of the bells meant I could move, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to. I didn't want to think about all the noises I had just heard, all the images that these horrific sounds brought to my mind, and to distract myself from them I arose from my bed. As I threw my blankets off, I noticed how cold it was. I shivered as my feet hit the floor, making contact with what I assume is melted puddles of snow. I followed the footsteps to my bedroom doorway, and I peered into the passage. I could see a faint yellow glow emanating from the dining room, and although everything within me begged me to stay in bed, I began to creep closer. I was more than confused. There was a power outage, but people were celebrating outside. We were advised to stay inside, but people were celebrating outside. All the lights in the house were off because of the power outage, including the Christmas tree, and yet there was still a faint glow emanating from the dining room. This was like that moment from The Matrix, where you could either take a step forward and have your eyes opened in a brutal fashion, or stay in the dark and go back to sleep. What will you do, Michael? I asked myself as I stood in that passage. I answered my own question with every step I took toward the dining room. And I immediately regretted my decision as soon as I peered into that room. Accompanied by the sound of cookies crumbling and milk being gulped, I saw a fiery robe that reached down to the floor. A glow something like red-hot coals emanated from it, and it stung my eyes to stare at it. But regardless, in awe of this thing, I stared. Strangely enough, despite this fiery robe in the dining room, the room itself was freezing cold. My body was shivering, and as the breath exited my mouth, it turned to mist. This presence filled the whole room, and my eyes trailed from the snow surrounding its cloak, a cloak that wrapped around a deathly figure. As I dared to lift my eyes to look at the front of the robe, I saw what looked like a pale white beard. This beard hung from what I can only assume was this thing's face. The only reason I assumed it was a face was because of the two burning red orbs that bore into my soul. As soon as my eyes met those orbs, I fell to my knees. I felt tears stream down my cheeks. I watched in anticipated horror as it pulled out a red sack from behind it. All the sickening sounds of hell poured out from the sack. As this creature opened it, darkness itself poured out from it. With a swift motion, it reached into the bag and pulled out a lump of coal the size of a man. It reached in and pulled out a second. I was already in tears at this point. But my heart was shattered when it reached in a third time, pulling out a lump of coal about half the size of a man, about the size of a child. A lump of coal that was once my younger sister. Those fiery orbs met my eyes again. By some miracle it pulled itself through the chimney. I heard dozens of footsteps on the roof and then silence. I stared out the window as I watched the sleigh fly past the moon.